12 years before the truth was uncovered in a gymnasium bathed in flickering fluorescent lights, a young girl named Ella Mason disappeared from a quiet suburban neighborhood where bad things weren't supposed to happen. She was 13 years old, last seen wearing pajama pants with tiny stars on them and an oversized hoodie that belonged to her older brother. She had gone to a friend's house for a birthday sleepover, a small gathering of 5 girls, movies and popcorn, nail polish and whispered secrets. It was a Friday in early spring, the kind of day when the air still held winter's chill, but the promise of warmth made everyone feel just a little lighter. No one knew then that this night would become a wound in the town's memory, a dark question that refused to fade. The house where she vanished sat at the edge of the neighborhood, one of the newer developments carved into the old forest. Beyond the backyard, the land sloped downward into dense woods, tangled and wild. It was a place of imagined monsters and dares among children, of flashlight games and shouted laughter during summer nights. That night, just before midnight, Ella told her friend Casey she was going to get some air. The living room had gotten stuffy from popcorn oil and body heat. She slipped out the sliding glass door and stood on the porch. The porch light cast a pale circle that ended in darkness. She stepped outside barefoot and vanished. The next morning, her sleeping bag was still rolled up. Her shoes sat untouched in the foyer. At first, the other girls thought she'd woken up early and gone home. But when Casey's mother called the Masons and heard the panic rise in the voice on the other end of the line, everything shifted. Within hours, police cruisers lined the street. Search dogs were brought in, the woods combed by volunteers and officers alike. For days they searched, then weeks, then months. Her face appeared on missing child posters across the state, but no trace of her was ever found. The story faded from the headlines, but not from memory, especially not for the people who had loved her. Casey, the host of the sleepover, never spoke about that night. Not to her friends, not even to her own parents. The other girls moved away over time. Ella's family, shattered by grief, eventually relocated to a quieter part of the state, trying to outrun the echo of her absence. But 12 years later, a high school reunion, casual, local, low effort, brought everyone back. And that's when the first piece of the unthinkable slipped through. It started as a joke, a flippant comment over cheap wine and boxed cookies in a gym that still smelled faintly of floor wax. Remember that sleepover where Casey's mom made us all do face masks and mine burn? Someone said. Casey smiled weakly, already regretting coming. But then another voice spoke, hesitant and confused. Wait, was that the night Ella disappeared? A silence followed, uncomfortable and tight. I didn't know that was the same night, the woman said. She was one of the 5 girls older now, divorced, 2 kids. I thought that was the next weekend or something. A low murmur followed. Casey didn't speak. Her hands were clenched under the table. The gym seemed too bright, the laughter around them too sharp. You were there, another woman said carefully. You were with us when we woke up. We counted, remember? Because the police asked us how many kids were in the house. No, the woman said. I wasn't. I remember that night. I got picked up early. I had a swim meet the next morning. My mom came late, almost midnight. I was so mad because I was falling asleep. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples in every direction. Casey stood up and left the table. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she sat in her car in the driveway of the house where she used to live, staring at the backyard. The woods were darker than she remembered. Somewhere deep inside her, something she had buried long ago began to stir. The next morning, she called the police. Detective Mia Langston had never worked on the original case. At the time of Ella Mason's disappearance, she'd been finishing her training in another city. But the file had haunted her since transferring to the department. The case was closed but never solved. Ella had vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no blood, no scent trail, just gone. Mia met Casey in the same station where Ella's parents had once waited for answers. Casey looked like someone unspooling thread from the center of herself. Her voice was low, halting, as she explained what the woman had said at the reunion. I didn't remember, she kept repeating. I didn't remember that she left early. Mia had heard it before. Trauma memory. Distortion through shock. It was common. But something about Casey's demeanor made her pause. There was something else buried there. "Is there anything you haven't told us?" she asked quietly. Casey stared at the floor. "There's a dream," she whispered. "I don't think it's real. I've had it since I was a kid. I'm in the woods. It's dark, and I'm barefoot. And I hear someone calling my name. I follow the voice. There's a clearing. I think someone else is there too, but I can't see their face." She looked up, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "It's just a dream." Mia didn't believe in dreams as evidence, but she believed in patterns. She reopened the file. A week later, another girl from the sleepover, Rachel, came forward. She hadn't attended the reunion, but after hearing about it through a friend, something had clicked in her memory. "That night," she said, "I woke up. I thought I heard whispering. I thought it was Ella. I didn't open my eyes. I was scared. It didn't sound right." "What do you mean?" Mia asked. Rachel hesitated. It sounded like she was crying, but not crying because she was scared, crying like she didn't want to be heard. The detail chilled Mia. In the original interviews, Rachel had said she'd slept through the night. Now, this new version, was it a recovered memory? Or the mind stitching new meaning onto old impressions? Mia dug through the case file. There had been no sign of forced entry. The door had been left unlocked. The dog, a Labrador, hadn't barked once. It had been curled at the foot of the master bed. Comfortable. Undisturbed. It didn't add up, unless it wasn't a stranger. Unless whoever took Ella had walked through that house without fear, without noise, like they belonged. Mia returned to Casey. "We need to talk again," she said. Casey nodded, her expression blank. "There's something I need to show you," she said. From a box in her closet, she produced an old VHS tape, labeled in neat handwriting, "Birthday Sleepover, April 2007. Casey hadn't watched it since the week after Ella disappeared. "We filmed everything back then," she said. "I don't remember what's on it." Mia sat with a tech in the department's AV room as the tape flickered to life. Grainy footage, girls singing into hairbrushes, a kitchen table covered in candy and soda, the camera swinging wildly as someone ran through the hallway. "That's Ella," Casey whispered. The camera caught her face for a split second, smiling, laughing, alive. Mia leaned forward. "Rewind that," she said. In the background, barely visible, was a figure. A man. Standing at the top of the stairs. Watching. Not moving. Just watching. The grain flickered as the tape rewound and resumed, freezing again on the frame where the man stood half obscured by shadow at the top of the stairs. His face was just outside the angle of the camera, blurred and indistinct, but his presence was unmistakable. He didn't belong in the frame. The girls in the footage were unaware of him, too caught up in the chaotic energy of the evening to notice the stillness above them. But the adults watching the tape now did. Mia's stomach turned as she leaned closer. "Do you remember who that could be?" she asked Casey. Casey shook her head slowly, visibly shaken. "No one. No one was supposed to be upstairs. My dad was away for work. My mom went to bed early. There wasn't supposed to be anyone else in the house." The tape continued. "At some point, someone must have set the camcorder down on a table because it filmed from a low, stationary angle. The girls were dancing, laughing. Then, as the time code rolled toward midnight, the room emptied. One by one, the girls moved out of frame, heading upstairs. The room sat still for a moment. Then, movement. In the far corner of the screen, the figure emerged again. This time, he moved into the room, slow and deliberate, and reached for something on the table. The screen cut to black. Mia sat back in her chair. "Do you still have the camera?" she asked. Casey blinked, dazed. "I think it's in the attic." The camera was old, dusty, but intact. The department sent it for forensic analysis. It would take time, but Mia already knew. The man had been there that night, inside the house, moving like he belonged. If the footage hadn't cut out, maybe they'd have more. But what they had was enough to reopen the case officially, publicly. When news broke, it made local headlines again. Ella's name was back in print. her photo aging beside the newer technology of modern news graphics. Her parents were interviewed. Her mother's voice trembled as she spoke of hope and fear in equal measure. "We always believed," she said. "We had to." The pressure renewed something in the investigation. People who had been silent began speaking. A neighbor came forward, someone who had lived across the street at the time. "I remember a truck," he said. "Late that night. It was idling with the lights off, down by the woods. I thought it was just someone taking a call or something." Mia pulled old property maps. There had been a utility road behind the woods, gated but accessible to anyone who knew it was there. Enough space to pull off, to wait, to take someone. The case began to shift. Theories sharpened into working hypotheses. Ella hadn't wandered off. She'd been taken by someone who had been inside the house, someone who knew the layout, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The footage didn't show a break-in. It showed familiarity, calm, control. Mia went back to Casey again, this time with photos. Staff members from the school, parents of other kids, extended family. "Look at these slowly," she said. Casey flipped through them one by one. She paused. "Him," she whispered. "He looks familiar." The man in the photo had been a volunteer at the middle school. He'd helped chaperone events, monitored halls during dances. His name was Robert Keller. No record, no complaints, nothing official. But Mia dug deeper. A decade-old police report from another county. A teenage girl who reported being followed home from school. Description matched. No charges filed. The girl had moved away soon after. Mia reached out to her. Her name was Lena, now 25, working in Chicago. She remembered everything. "He followed me," she said. "I reported it, but my mom didn't want the hassle. We moved 2 months later." She described him as quiet, watchful, with a truck that always seemed to be nearby. Mia pulled DMV records. Keller still owned a truck, same make and model from the report. When she brought him in for questioning, he was cordial, almost amused. "That was 12 years ago," he said. "And I was never inside that house." Mia showed him the tape still. "Who is this then?" Keller stared at it, then smiled. "You can't see his face," he said. Could be anyone. It was true legally. It wasn't enough. But something had shifted in him. A flicker. A slip. The kind that experienced investigators recognize. Mia pressed harder. Subpoenaed his storage unit. Inside, she found a bin labeled Old Junk. Beneath VHS tapes and magazines was a bracelet, beaded, pink and purple, letters that spelled ELLA. The room went still when it was brought into evidence. Ella's mother broke down when she saw it. "I made that for her," she said. "She wore it all the time." It was the first physical link. A bridge across 12 years. Mia re-interviewed the girls from the sleepover. Small details emerged. A door that creaked. A shadow passing under a crack. One girl remembered a smell like gasoline and sweat. The composite of half-memories began to form something tangible, but it was still not enough. No body. No confession. Mia needed more. She pulled school records. Found out Keller had signed up for the volunteer list at Casey's school 2 months before Ella disappeared. He had volunteered only once, the day before the sleepover. A library day. A chance to observe. To select. Mia requested the sign-in logs from the school. He had signed out at 3:04 p.m. The same time Ella's class ended, the same time the camera at the back exit showed a girl walking alone, and someone following her just out of frame. The footage was old, grainy, but it matched his build, his walk. She brought it to the DA. "This isn't just circumstantial," she said. "It's method, it's pattern." The DA hesitated. "But no body," he said. "We charge and lose. He walks." Mia understood. But she wasn't done yet. She went to Ella's father. "I think we can find where she is," she said. "But we need to look again, where the dog stopped tracking. The woods." The trees were thicker now, but the terrain hadn't changed. Mia brought in a cadaver dog team. They started at the backyard. The trail was cold, but something lingered in the soil. The dog paused near a gnarled tree, bark stripped, moss disturbed. It sniffed, whined, and sat. They began to dig. The earth was damp and stubborn, packed down by time and roots that had woven themselves into a silent tapestry of concealment. The team worked slowly, methodically, each shovel of dirt carrying the weight of 12 years of unanswered questions. Just beneath the surface, inches down, a patch of faded cloth emerged, pale pink, stained and shredded. They stopped. Brushes replaced shovels. Every movement became delicate, reverent. Piece by piece, they unearthed what lay hidden. Tattered remnants of fabric, a single sneaker, and beneath them, human remains small, fragile, unmistakably those of a child. The medical examiner arrived hours later, the woods now sealed off, floodlights casting long shadows that danced across the forest floor. The remains were transported with care, sealed and tagged, a quiet ritual that marked the end of one part of the search and the beginning of something far darker. Mia stood back, watching. She had seen this before, the solemn choreography of recovery, but never with this level of emotional gravity. This wasn't just another case. This was Ella. DNA confirmation came within 48 hours. It was her. The news broke in waves. The town, once half forgotten by the wider world, was thrust back into the spotlight. Candlelight vigils bloomed on porches and at street corners. Flowers were laid outside the school. Children now in college returned home, drawn by memory and guilt. The question wasn't just what happened. It was how it had gone unnoticed for so long. The indictment followed swiftly. Robert Keller was arrested without incident, his expression blank, his eyes betraying nothing. The bracelet and the remains were irrefutable. Prosecutors moved forward with charges of kidnapping, unlawful confinement, murder, and desecration of remains. The trial was scheduled for early spring. But what no one expected was what surfaced before then. In the weeks that followed Keller's arrest, as detectives combed through his properties, his storage units, his digital footprint, they found more. Not another victim, not yet, but evidence that suggested a longer pattern of behavior. Maps, newspaper clippings, photos, names, places. Missing children from across state lines, none conclusively linked until now. Mia studied them. Each was different, some taken while walking home, others during family outings, one at a bus stop. But there was a signature, subtle and chilling. The use of camouflage, the blending into roles of authority, substitute teacher, camp aide, community volunteer. He had moved like a ghost through these lives, always just outside suspicion, his presence overlooked or forgotten. She brought her findings to the FBI. They opened a wider task force. Meanwhile, the community turned inward. The girls who had once been at that sleepover, now grown, faced a reckoning with memory. Casey withdrew from public view. Her mother gave a single statement, voice brittle with fear. "We thought we knew who was in our home," she said. "But monsters don't always break in. Sometimes they're already inside." At trial, the prosecution laid out its case with surgical precision. Forensic evidence, DNA, the video footage, the bracelet, testimony from Mia, from the neighbors, from Lena in Chicago, who described his pattern of stalking. The defense offered little, a vague claim of mistaken identity, no alibi, no alternate theory, just denial. Ella's mother took the stand. She spoke not of anger, but of absence. The birthdays missed, the empty seat at dinner. The doll was left untouched on a shelf that no longer bore dust. Her voice cracked only once when she described the last voicemail Ella ever left her. "It was nothing important," she said. She wanted to know if she could bring her pajamas with stars instead of hearts. "I told her stars were fine." She smiled, then cried, then fell silent. The jury took only 6 hours to deliberate. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Keller remained motionless. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared straight ahead. Ella's father stood up, not in anger, in finality. The courtroom held its breath. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, light, slow, like a benediction. A week later, the Turners held a funeral. Not a service of mourning, but one of remembrance. Photos of Ella lined the chapel walls, laughing at the beach, hugging a dog, holding a sparkler in each hand on the 4th of July. Her favorite songs played quietly in the background. Friends spoke, teachers, neighbors. Mia was there too, sitting in the back, her notepad left in the car. She wasn't there to investigate. She was there to bear witness. As the service ended, Ella's mother stepped up once more. Her voice was steady. "We were robbed," she said. "But we will not let her memory be erased. She was joy. She was stardust. She was our beginning." That evening, a candle burned in every window in the neighborhood, a silent vigil, a promise that she would not be forgotten again. But the story wasn't quite finished, because 1 month after the conviction, Mia received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Faded, grainy, taken from what looked like inside a car. It showed a girl, not Ella, but someone else, standing near a school. And in the corner of the image, partially obscured by glare, was a man, tall, wearing a volunteer badge. Not Keller, someone else. On the back of the photo was a single sentence, handwritten in block letters. He wasn't working alone. Mia stared at it for a long time. The edges curled from moisture. No fingerprints. No clues. Just a new question, one that would ripple forward through everything they thought they had resolved. She placed the photo in a new file, not to forget, but to begin again. Because sometimes the end of one story is just the shadow of the next. It began, as many things do, with silence. Not the kind that came with grief or the weight of memory, but something sharper, more deliberate. Mia placed the photo in a secure envelope, logged it as anonymous evidence, and stared at the words once more. He wasn't working alone. The grainy image offered few leads. The angle suggested it was taken through a windshield, maybe from a parked car. The girl, likely in middle school, had her backpack slung over one shoulder, oblivious to the camera. The man beside her was only partially visible. His face was obscured, but there was just enough. A faded logo on the badge, a glimpse of a scar on the wrist. It wasn't much, but it was enough to open something that had, for weeks, felt closed. Mia contacted the task force liaison and submitted the photo. A forensic specialist attempted to enhance it, sharpening features, running the image through facial recognition software, but the results were inconclusive. Still, the detail of the badge, the scar gave them direction. The badge belonged to a regional after-school mentorship program based out of a nearby city. The database listed over 200 volunteers from the last decade. Mia began to comb through each profile, cross-referencing volunteer dates, known addresses, and proximity to the schools near where the image was taken. Then came the breakthrough. One man, Marcus Alvey, had volunteered intermittently between 2010 and 2013, overlapping with the timeline of Ella's disappearance. He had no criminal record, but 2 disciplinary notes in the system, one for inappropriate behavior with a student, dismissed for lack of evidence, and another for failure to pass a background check on renewal. He had quietly faded from the system. No further employment. No digital footprint. Mia's instincts hardened. She began asking questions, reaching out to former coordinators, students, anyone who might remember him. Most had vague recollections. A few remembered his voice, soft-spoken, measured. He often brought candy to his sessions. One former coordinator remembered something else he always asked to be placed in the younger age groups, said he connected better with them. A record request revealed something chilling. Marcus Alvey and Robert Keller had once shared an address, briefly, just under a year before Ella's disappearance. Roommates. Or perhaps something more coordinated. The investigation opened wide again. Agents fanned out, searching for Alvey, but he had vanished. The address listed on his old driver's license led to an abandoned trailer on a patch of land choked with weeds. Inside, they found nothing but decay and one small clue. A wall covered in yellowed newspaper clippings, all of missing children, dozens of names, dozens of faces. One of them was Ella. Mia stood in that trailer, breathing shallowly through the damp rot of the air, staring at the wall. It wasn't just obsession. It was documentation, a pattern, Proof. He was watching. Following. Keeping track. Each clipping was pinned with precision, circled in red ink. The ink was fresh. That meant he had been there recently. Beneath one clipping, an older case from another state, someone had written a single word in a small, tight script. Gift. There was no explanation, no elaboration, just that word. Over and over again, Mia returned to the photo, to the possibility that this wasn't over. And that meant the danger wasn't over either. The town tried to move on, schools reopened. Spring thawed the last of the snow, but beneath the surface, a new current of fear ran through everything. Because if Alvy was out there, and the police believed he was then another child, might be in danger. They released his photo to the public. Tip lines lit up, but none led anywhere conclusive. He had disappeared into the folds of society, the way predators often do, quiet, forgettable, inoffensive on the surface. And the thought haunted Mia. The idea that someone could so easily vanish, even after everything, even with every eye looking. One day, she returned home to find an envelope at her doorstep. No postage, no handwriting. Inside was a flash drive. No markings, no note. Against better judgment, she opened it on a secured laptop at the precinct. It contained a single video file. Grainy footage, a bedroom, dim lighting, a young girl, not Ella, sitting on a mattress. Silent, blinking toward the camera, eyes wide with fear. A man's voice, off-screen, calm and deliberate. Say hello. The girl didn't respond. The video cut to black. Its timestamp was recent, dated just 5 days earlier. The horror was immediate and total. A task force was assembled. Facial recognition identified the girl as a recently reported missing person from a city 3 hours north. She had been gone for just under a week. The video was real, and it meant Alvy wasn't just watching anymore. He was hunting again. The race was on. Officers traced metadata from the file, narrowed location based on acoustics, wall structure, ambient noise. A lead emerged, an abandoned motel on the outskirts of a forgotten highway. SWAT moved in at dawn. They breached the door. Room 204. It was empty, but in the closet, they found the girl. She was alive. Shaken, but alive. Alvy had escaped just hours earlier, left behind only a trail of wrappers and a new clipping, one that hadn't yet made the news. A girl, 9 years old, from a town 3 states over. A picture printed, a name scrawled underneath. Mia felt it like ice in her spine. This wasn't over. It was only evolving. And Alvy, whatever drove him, was accelerating. The motel room was still warm. The sheets bore the outline of a body that had been lying in them only hours earlier. A plastic food container sat open on the floor, untouched noodles dried to a crust, and a crumpled fast food receipt in the trash. The timestamp was the night before. Alvy was close, too close. The girl's name was Jasmine, barely spoke. She sat wrapped in a wool blanket in the back of the ambulance, her hands trembling, eyes wide and unblinking. A forensic nurse gently coaxed her to drink water, to breathe, to know she was safe. But the girl wouldn't look anyone in the eyes. Only one phrase passed her lips, a whisper so faint the EMT had to lean in to hear. There were others. Mia was in the room when the detective repeated it. Her stomach twisted. They had been too slow. This wasn't a one-off. This was something larger. The way Jasmine said it, with finality, with something close to dread, suggested memory, witnessing, not imagination, not a dream. The task force expanded. The FBI issued a nationwide alert. Alvy's photo went to every media outlet in the country, but the man remained a ghost. Months passed. Summer overtook the hills, drowning the town in green. Parents began picking up their kids from school in pairs again. Sleepovers became supervised, but nothing could dull the dread that something had been missed. Then in July, on the edge of a coastal highway hundreds of miles away, a park ranger checking a remote rest area found a piece of fabric tangled in the brush. A child's backpack. Inside, a photo, folded neatly, of 2 girls, one of them unmistakably Ella, But the second girl wasn't anyone the task force could identify. She looked younger, perhaps 9. Mia stared at the photo for hours. The way the girls were posed sitting on a log in a wooded area, half smiles, eyes slightly glassy, suggested staging, but the background offered a clue: a crumbling stone wall, half buried by leaves. A landmark. They ran it against park registries, old infrastructure maps, and historical sites. And then they found it. A decommissioned ranger outpost near the edge of a large national forest, overgrown and forgotten. The area was remote, difficult to reach, no surveillance, no cell towers. It was the perfect hiding place. Law enforcement moved in under cover of darkness. Drones scanned the clearing. And then, the faint heat signature, a door beneath the earth, reinforced. Hand-built, buried beneath moss and stone, they descended in silence. Flashlights flickered against damp stone. The smell hit them first: mildew, sweat, and something metallic. The door was locked from the inside. They used bolt cutters. What they found inside changed everything. 2 girls, alive, malnourished, disoriented, but breathing. One was the girl from the photo. The other had been missing for over a year. But there was no sign of Alvy. Just a cot, a desk, and another wall of clippings. Each one connected to missing children. Each one dated, circled, catalogued, and in the center a blank space, taped in the middle, a new photo of a girl not yet missing. The date underneath was 3 days away. They stopped him just in time. Or so they believed. The media exploded. Headlines called it a miracle. The underground prison story dominated every channel. But Mia felt no triumph. Because on the back of the newest photo was a handwritten message. It read, "You'll never understand what this was. Not is, not will be, was, past tense." It wasn't ego. It was closure. As if Alvy knew this was the end of his plan, or his freedom. But where was he? There were no fingerprints, no evidence of where he went. The security cameras at local airports revealed nothing. He hadn't fled using conventional means. He had simply vanished. Again, that's when a theory emerged. What if he hadn't left? What if he had buried himself in the system, taken another identity, returned to society as someone new? A high-level behavioral analyst suggested the unthinkable, that Alvy had planned his disappearance from the beginning, and the underground prison wasn't the final act but a smokescreen. Mia pushed back. It felt too calculated, too broad. But the psychologist insisted, people like him, they don't stop. They just change shape. And then a tip came in from a correctional facility. A guard reviewing recent footage flagged something chilling. One of the volunteers who had been bringing books to inmates bore a striking resemblance to Alvy. Same posture, same gait. Different hair, different ID, but unmistakable. The man hadn't been hiding. He had inserted himself into the system again, close to the vulnerable, like before, like always. But when they checked the facility logs, the ID was fake. The name led nowhere. He was gone again, and all he left behind was a list, scribbled on the inside cover of a donated book. First names only. Dozens. Some matched past victims. Some matched no one. Not yet. Mia took the list and pinned it above her desk. A new map. A new mission. Because this wasn't over. The nightmare had evolved. And it was still out there, hiding behind a face no one would recognize. Waiting, watching, planning. 3 years passed. In the quiet corner of a small county sheriff's department, Mia still kept her badge in the drawer instead of her pocket. The case hadn't been formally closed. No one said the words, but life, as it often does, moved forward without consent. New cases, new files. But the photo stayed on her wall. The one of the girls on the log. It had faded slightly under fluorescent light. She saw it every day. A reminder that some things don't end with handcuffs. They end in silence. In absence. Until the invitation arrived. It was a heavy envelope, cream-colored cardstock, embossed. A private school logo. A reunion invitation. Class of 2010. Location: A lakefront retreat just outside the town where it all began. The same town where Ella had disappeared 12 years ago. Mia turned it over in her hands. It wasn't addressed to her. It had come to the station, redirected from an old forwarding address. Meant for Ella. Meant for a girl who was never supposed to grow up. But it hadn't come alone. Tucked into the envelope was a second item. A Polaroid. Recent. A group of young adults laughing beside a fire pit. And in the center, someone who looked like her. Like Ella, but older. The cheekbones. The slight dimple. The eyes. That same hazel green. Mia's hands trembled as she called the family. "Have you seen this?" she asked. Silence on the other end. Then Ella's mother's voice, brittle and slow. We didn't want to tell anyone." Mia's breath caught. "Tell anyone what?" "She came back," the voice said. "A year ago." Time slowed. Mia didn't speak. She didn't remember anything at first. The mother continued. "She was disoriented. She wouldn't tell us where she'd been. She used a different name, lived under a different identity. But it's her. Mia, it's her." The admission came like a blow. A year. And no one had said a word. "Why didn't you report it?" Mia asked, barely containing her disbelief. "We were told not to," came the answer. "By her. The reunion was in 3 days." Mia cleared her schedule. She didn't tell anyone. She packed a small overnight bag, took her old file, and made the drive through the winding hills back to the town where the story had started. The lakefront property was upscale. Manicured paths, white string lights, a smell of cedar and wine in the air. Alumni were already gathering. Laughter spilled from a fire pit. Music played from Bluetooth speakers. The ghosts of adolescence hovering in adult bodies. She walked slowly. Each face passed, was scanned, compared, rejected, until she saw her, across the fire. Standing with her back half turned, head tilted in a laugh. The same dimple, the same slight sway, but different too. Sharpened, weathered. She turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything else dissolved. "Ella?" Mia said softly. The woman blinked. Her smile faltered. "Do I know you?" she asked. Her voice was calm, measured. Too calm. "I'm Mia, Detective Whitlock. I investigated your case." A silence stretched between them. People nearby noticed. A shift in mood. Ella, if it was, Ella gestured toward a nearby trail. "Can we talk somewhere quieter?" she asked. They walked to the edge of the lake. The moon cast long silver shadows across the water. Mia spoke first. "Where have you been?" The woman looked down. "Everywhere. Nowhere." Her voice had an edge to it. Not fear. Not confusion. Something else. "Your mother said you came back a year ago." A nod. "Why didn't you tell us?" Another pause. "Because I didn't want to be found." Mia studied her. There was something in the woman's eyes. Clarity. Intelligence. But also, behind it, something cold. Something calculated. "Why now?" Mia asked. "Why come to this reunion?" "Because he might be here." The words hit like a thunderclap. "Who?" "The man. The one who took me." Mia's heart raced. "You remember?" A slow nod. "Not all at once, but yes, pieces." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A name. A face. A classmate. Someone Mia hadn't considered. Someone who had lived in the town, left, and returned only recently. "It was him," she said. "He was older. A friend of someone's brother. He watched us that night." Mia took the paper. She recognized the face. A man now. Married. A teacher. Still living in town. "You're sure?" "I wasn't. Until last week." She pulled out another photo. This one taken with a phone. Grainy. A man walking into a hardware store. He has the same walk, the same eyes. The air felt electric. "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" Mia asked again. The woman looked at her, eyes burning now. "Because I didn't know who I was. And when I did, I didn't trust anyone." Mia nodded. She understood. "So, what now?" she asked. The woman smiled faintly. "Now we find out if he recognizes me." And just like that, the script flipped. The prey had returned. And this time, She wasn't running. She was hunting. The next morning, the lakefront property shimmered under a soft, overcast sky. Birds moved across the water, the world seemingly oblivious to the tension coiled beneath its surface. Mia awoke early. She hadn't slept well. The conversation from the night before echoed like a looped recording in her mind. The woman who called herself Ella, or had once been Ella, was somewhere on the property, perhaps sipping coffee by the water, perhaps rehearsing her confrontation, perhaps wondering if she had made the right choice coming back. Mia reviewed the file. She had marked the man's name years ago, but as a long shot. He had been at the party for only minutes, according to others. A peripheral figure, not close to the girls, not even directly invited. But that was always the flaw, wasn't it? Predators don't always appear in focus. Sometimes they hover at the edge of the frame, just a shadow in someone else's memory. Mia took the photo Ella had handed her, the grainy image from the hardware store. The resemblance was uncanny. Same squared jaw, same uneven ears. A distinctive profile that aligned with the class photo from 12 years ago. The man's name was Ian Lasker. He was now a middle school gym teacher, a decorated coach with community awards, and a family. On the outside, a model citizen. Mia checked the registration list. His name was there. She scanned the crowd at breakfast but didn't see him. Then, just past the lobby doors, she caught a glimpse. He was standing at the edge of the dock, sipping coffee, speaking with another alum. Tall, fit, baseball cap low. Her pulse quickened. She walked toward him slowly, watching his movements. Ella was right. The gait, the subtle rigidity in his stance. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to stir unease. Mia had to tread carefully. She didn't have a warrant. She didn't even have probable cause, just a gut feeling, and the word of a woman who had been missing for over a decade. She approached the dock. "Ian?" He turned, smile polite but guarded. "Yes?" "I'm Mia Whitlock. We've met before, years ago. I was with the sheriff's department." His expression didn't shift. If anything, it cooled. "Right. I remember the case. You were at the sleepover briefly. I dropped off my cousin, didn't stay long. Do you remember Ella?" He shrugged. "The missing girl? Sure, we all do. Did you ever speak to her that night?" "No," he said immediately. "Barely even saw her." His responses were smooth, practiced. But something in his eyes tightened, just slightly. A flicker of recognition or guilt. "We have new information," Mia said. "She's come back." That got him. His eyes widened a fraction. "She has?" "Yes." "Is she here?" The question was casual. Too casual. Mia didn't answer. She watched him. "Does that concern you?" He shook his head. "No, I'm just surprised. After all this time." Mia nodded. "You'll be around later?" "Of course. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Back inside, Mia found Ella sitting alone in the lodge, staring at a photograph hanging on the wall, a black and white image of the lake from the 1950s. "He's here," Mia said. "I saw him." "I know," Ella replied without turning. "I saw him this morning. He looked at me like he didn't know me, but he did. I saw it in his face." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Mia sat beside her. "You don't have to confront him. We can investigate quietly. Build a case." Ella's voice was calm but firm. "I've waited 12 years. I'm not going to wait anymore." Mia looked into her eyes. Whatever vulnerability had once lived there had hardened into steel. This wasn't the lost girl from a missing poster. This was someone else. Someone reforged by fire. That evening, as the reunion crowd gathered by the fire pit again, laughter rising in easy waves, Ella walked out alone. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back. She looked older than her age. She moved with purpose. Ian was already there. He stood beside the flames, drink in hand, speaking with a group of old friends. She approached, slowly, deliberately. Mia watched from a distance. The fire crackled. Conversations paused. People turned, sensing something charged. "Ian," Ella said. His head turned, their eyes locked. Recognition now clear as day. His face went slack. "Ella," he said. "Not a question. A name." spoken like an invocation. Silence fell. "You remember me," she said. "Of course," he whispered. And then, "I'm sorry." The words shocked everyone. Someone gasped. Mia stepped forward, hand at her side, near the badge she no longer wore. Ella's voice didn't shake. "Tell them what you did." Ian's eyes darted around. It was a mistake. I didn't mean." "You took me," she said. "I was a child." And then, for the first time, his composure cracked. The truth hung in the air, thick and undeniable. No one moved. No one laughed. The fire, now just embers, flickered against the stone. It wasn't justice. Not yet, but it was truth. And sometimes, that's the first weapon a survivor wields. After the confrontation at the fire pit, the atmosphere around the reunion shifted. What had begun as a weekend of nostalgia and laughter now felt like an unfolding reckoning. Word traveled quickly. Someone had recorded the exchange on their phone, and by morning, it had circulated among the attendees. A shaky video that froze time at the moment Ian Lasker said the words, "I'm sorry." Mia knew that wasn't a confession in the legal sense. It wasn't enough for charges, but it was a rupture, and from it, the truth had begun to bleed. Ian checked out of the lodge at first light, leaving behind a key and a folded note that simply said, "It was never supposed to happen." By noon, Mia was on the phone with the local authorities. She forwarded her report, the video, and Ella's testimony. An official investigation was finally open again. For the first time in 12 years, the file wasn't marked inactive. Ella remained at the lodge. She sat by the window in the reading room, watching the wind ripple across the lake. Mia joined her. "He's gone," Mia said. "For now. But this isn't over." "It will never be over," Ella replied. "But it's moving." She didn't smile, but her face eased. The tightness around her eyes softened. "What happens next?" "We reopen the case. Collect evidence. We may be able to prosecute. And even if not, he won't be anonymous anymore." Ella nodded slowly. "I want that." She turned away from the window. "But I also want to go home." "Where's home?" Mia asked gently. "I don't know yet," she whispered. That evening, the reunion ended with a quiet dinner, much smaller than the opening night. The guests who stayed were more subdued, their conversations reflective. Some avoided Ella. Others approached her cautiously, offering words they hadn't been able to say as children. "I'm sorry. I remember you. I wish we had known." It was awkward, messy, but it was something. Mia walked the grounds once more before leaving. She retraced the path from the cabin to the lake, to the clearing, where the fire pit still smoldered faintly. She thought of Ella walking alone that night 12 years ago, of the turn in the trail, the darkness, the sound of a car door, the night that had fractured her. That trail would never be the same again. For Mia, it would always be haunted by that shadow. But now, the silence had been broken. She returned to the lodge to find Ella by the front desk, waiting with a small duffel bag and a stillness that suggested not peace, but preparation. "You sure you don't want a ride?" Mia asked. Ella shook her head. "I'll get there." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere quiet, maybe the ocean. I haven't seen it since—" She trailed off. "Since before. You can call me," Mia said. "Anytime." "I know." She paused, then added, "Thank you for believing me. You made it easy." "No," Ella said. "I didn't. But thank you anyway." They didn't hug. There were no tears, just a long look. Two women, connected by something terrible and sacred. Ella walked through the front doors into the morning light. She didn't look back. Mia watched her disappear into the trees, her form swallowed by the landscape that had once stolen her. This time, she was walking out, free. A week later, charges were filed against Ian Lasker. Not for abduction, the statute of limitations complicated the legal process, but for related crimes connected to new evidence uncovered after Ella's return. A storage unit, registered in his name, yielded disturbing artifacts: old clothing, photographs, and, most damning of all, a school ID card belonging to a missing girl from another county. The case widened. Investigators from multiple jurisdictions began collaborating. What began as the resolution of one girl's disappearance had cracked open a larger pattern, a shadow cast across the lives of others. Mia stayed involved. She consulted as a civilian expert, her insight into trauma and long-term disappearance cases proving invaluable. Ella, now publicly identified through a careful, consensual process, chose to tell her story in a controlled interview. It aired quietly, respectfully. There were no salacious details. Just a quiet, unwavering narrative of survival. She didn't focus on the horror. She focused on the return. The message was simple. I was taken, I came back, and I will not be silent. The response was overwhelming. Letters, emails, messages from survivors, from girls who had never told anyone, from families still waiting for answers, from people who had feared they were alone. Ella's voice had broken open the silence, and through it, others had found their own. Mia watched the interview from her office. The light dim, the video paused on Ella's face. Older now, lined with experience, but strong, unflinching. She thought of the girl who vanished at a sleepover, and the woman who re-emerged through fire. They weren't the same, but one had survived to become the other. And sometimes, that was enough. The months that followed were a strange mixture of movement and stillness. Investigators moved forward with precision, piecing together timelines, connecting evidence across counties. New survivors came forward, each with their own fragment of a larger, darker puzzle. The picture forming was one no one wanted to see, but it had to be seen. Mia found herself caught in the quiet space between progress and grief. She wasn't a detective, not officially, but Ella still called her sometimes, and the investigators still asked for her insights. She became something of a bridge between the system and the story, between the past and the voices, just now learning how to speak. In early spring, Ella moved to a small coastal town. It was a place with no connection to her past, no memory of what had been taken. She rented a modest cottage near the dunes and planted a row of wildflowers along the porch. "They'll come back every year," she told Mia over the phone. "Even if I don't," Mia smiled. "They will. They're stubborn like that." The calls became less frequent, but not because anything was wrong. Ella was learning to live in a world where her name wasn't whispered, where every shadow didn't mean danger. She took long walks, wrote in a journal, slowly rebuilt a relationship with her estranged mother. It was fragile, but it was real, and for the first time, the pages of her life were being written in her own hand. But healing, Mia knew, was not linear. It circled back. It asked hard questions, and it never arrived without scars. In mid-April, Mia attended a conference on victim advocacy. She presented Ella's case under anonymity, walking a room full of professionals through what she'd learned about silence, about memory, about how trauma distorts and reshapes a life. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat too long. Then someone stood, and another. Applause, not loud but lasting, filled the air. It wasn't for her. It was for what Ella had endured, for what she had overcome. Later, in the lobby of the conference center, a woman approached Mia. She looked hesitant, her eyes shadowed by something old and unnamed. She introduced herself only as Claire. "I watched that story," she said. "The girl who vanished, the one who came back." "Yes," Mia said. "She's extraordinary. I think something like that happened to my sister. She disappeared when we were kids. Everyone said she ran away. But there was this one man." Mia listened. She always would. The shadows had a way of calling to one another, like echoes in a canyon, and sometimes it only took one voice breaking through to begin the avalanche. As summer neared, the case against Ian Lasker prepared for trial. His legal team attempted every maneuver, motions to dismiss, claims of mental instability, questions about evidence chain of custody. But the prosecutor was relentless, and the evidence damning. Mia would not be called to testify, but Ella would. She'd made the decision herself. "I won't be invisible anymore," she told Mia. "Not in his courtroom, not in this life." The day before the trial began, Ella returned to the town she'd fled from. It was not easy. The air smelled too familiar, the faces too unchanged. But she walked into the courthouse with her head high, her hand steady as she placed it on the Bible, her voice unwavering as she said, "I do." The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back. Locals filled the benches. Ian Lasker sat stone-faced, dressed in a clean suit he did not deserve. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak. But Ella spoke. She told the truth, not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. Enough for the jury to see, enough to replace doubt with fire. And when the defense tried to twist her words, she held firm. "I was a child," she said. "He took everything, but he didn't take my voice. It wasn't about the sentence. It was about reckoning." And when the jury returned, when the foreman stood and read the verdict guilty on all counts, the courtroom didn't cheer. It exhaled, as if holding its breath for a decade and finally releasing it. Ian Lasker was sentenced to life without parole. He left the courtroom in chains, and that was the last time Ella ever saw his face. That night, she stood by the lake again. Not the lake from the reunion, but a different one, a quieter one, near her new home. She stood with her feet in the water and let the wind play with her hair. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She simply stood, alive and unbroken. The girl who vanished had become a woman who returned not whole, not healed, but real, and real was enough. The final part of Ella's story wasn't about courts or confessions. It was about morning light falling on her kitchen table, about the hum of the ocean beyond her cottage walls, about standing in a world that once felt impossible to reach. Mia visited her that August. The drive was long, winding through coastal backroads where pine met sand. When she arrived, Ella was barefoot in the garden, tending the wildflowers. They had bloomed defiantly, beautifully. "They made it," Mia said. "So did I," Ella replied. They spent the weekend together, talking, not always about the past, sometimes about books, about coffee, about the stray cat that had taken to sleeping under Ella's porch. There were still moments of silence between them, but it was a soft silence now, no longer weighted by fear. On the last night, they walked the shoreline. The sky above them was brushed in lavender and gold, the last light melting into the sea. "Do you think it ever really ends?" Ella asked. "The healing?" Mia shook her head. "No, but I think it gets quieter. And I think we learn how to carry it without letting it crush us. Sometimes I don't know who I would have been without it." "None of us do," Mia said. "But you're someone now, someone strong, someone here." They watched the waves for a while. The sound was ancient, eternal. "Do you think there are more like him?" Ella asked quietly. "Yes," Mia answered honestly, "but there are also more like you." That night, as Mia packed to leave, Ella handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photo of Ella, standing on the shoreline, wind in her hair, a faint smile on her lips. On the back, she had written a date, the day she came home. "You don't have to hang it up," she said, "but I want you to have proof." "Proof of what?" "That I'm not just a story you helped tell. I'm real." Mia took the photo. She carried it with her always. Not in a frame, but in her wallet, worn from time and movement. It reminded her why she did this, why she listened, why she believed. The case faded from the headlines, as cases always do. But in its wake, things changed. Funding was increased for cold case units. Training for law enforcement improved. A nonprofit was formed in Ella's name to support long-term missing children and their families. Survivors found a new language, and with it, new strength. Ella didn't become a public figure. She never wrote a book or launched a podcast, but she did speak quietly, carefully to those who needed to hear her. And in doing so, she built something better than fame. She built truth. She built trust. She built a path for others to follow. Sometimes, when the weather was right, she would return to the place where it all started. Not the cabin, but the lake. Not for closure. Closure is a myth. But for continuity. For acknowledgement. She would walk the old path. Feel the leaves under her feet. Hear the wind in the trees. And when she stood by the water, she would remember the girl who vanished. She would whisper, "You're safe now," and walk away. The girl was gone, but the woman had returned. And the woman stayed. Mia continued her work, one case at a time, one voice at a time. She never promised miracles, but she promised presence, and that was enough. Because in the end, stories like Ella's aren't about happy endings. They're about survival, about the brutal, beautiful act of returning to a world that never stopped spinning, about being seen, being believed, being real. In a world that tries to erase the broken, the missing, the hurt, Ella's story endured. Not as a warning, but as a light. Dim, perhaps, but unwavering. A girl vanished. A woman came back. And, in her coming back, she reminded the world of something it often forgets. Survival is not quiet. It is not neat. It is not soft. It is thunder in the bones. And sometimes, it sounds like a name spoken after 12 long years. A name that no longer echoes into the void, but answers, and stands, and says, I'm here. I made it. I remember.